Hello, this is Gary Garrett from Otis College of Art and Design. Today we're going to be talking about how to use a line to build up form, to give it weight, to show overlaps and atmospheric perspective. These techniques can not only be used for life drawing, but also used for hard shell and mechanical objects as well. In these upcoming drawings, you can see that the line not only encases the subject, but also defines the volume and lighting as well. A wide array of built up, thick and thin, curvy lines defines the gesture and anatomy of the figure. On the other hand, you will see how to combine cool, curvy lines with sharp edges and learn the mastery of drawing correct ellipses. We will also look at sketching soft form and anatomy and how best to sculpt lines to create hard and rounded edges and volumes. So now I will walk you through a brief introduction of a whole arsenal of different pencils and erasers. First on the list are ordinary standard 2B pencil leads that you can buy at any stationery store. Next are the color and watercolor pencils. They have a polychrome waxy core that vary from very buttery to rock hard. The last three pencils are pastel, conte, and charcoal. They're grainy, earthy, with a huge variety of hardnesses and texture. From here we look at soft, kneaded erasers that can be used to soften edges and shadows, and your standard rubber eraser that covers larger areas. The next three erasers are more specialized and can be used to get rid of small mistakes or surgically remove smudges and clean up lines. It's also nice that they come in different shapes and thicknesses. And last in this group is a small X-Acto knife to sharpen my pencils. It does need a cover though. So now we move on to a variety of pencils that are a little bit more out of the ordinary. We start off with these big wooden pencils with thick leads that cover large areas quickly. Then we move on to these yellow carpenter's pencils with a nice tough rectangular leads. These are graphite pencils with enamel coverings, great for gesture and really quick shading. Next we have these big burly mechanical pencils that allow you to push a button and change leads and then retract them for protection after use. Its weight makes for some real forceful mark making. This is a Kimberly pencil with a lead that feels like a combination of waxy color pencil and grainy charcoal. It makes for some great expressive line, but also creates some fine, subtle line as well. This is a traditional mechanical pencil with thinner lead. This device is similar in use to the blue mechanical pencil, but this black Cretacolor pencil holds a Conte-like lead or traditional graphite lead like the one to the right. It holds the lead very securely and is a really nice dynamic drawing tool. And last but not least are these two Prismacolor colored pencil blocks. Great for gestural figure drawing and hold an edge really well. They also come in a wide array of colors. Okay, now we move on to a more unique subject. How you hold your pencil and how it may affect your drawing, the line character, and the variety of expressive line that you create. The traditional way a lot of people draw is you hold a pencil like you are writing a letter, holding the pencil in a death grip close to the tip. The problem is what happens is you hide what you draw or what you potentially will be drawing under your clenched fist, and you can't see what your progress is. It works, but here's another solution you might want to try. Instead, turn the hand around and cradle the pencil in the palm of your hand and push the tip of the sharpened pencil away from your fingers. Use the index finger and the thumb to lightly hold the pencil in balance. This will give you much more leverage to create dynamic lines. Use the pinky finger to push the pencil into the paper, controlling the line weight. The beauty of working this way is that using the pencil traditionally, it gives you a limited variety of lines. On the other hand, the craded palm method allows you to easily turn the pencil sideways, moving the tip level with the paper and allowing for long, soft edges. If you need to go back to a traditional hold, just put the pencil on the other side of the index finger and flip it up and then flip it back. It definitely makes for a more dynamic drawing having different options to go to. So right now I'm just going to freestyle a little bit, and you can watch how the pencil in the hand works over a piece of paper. So again, working with this method, you want to watch the side of your hand doesn't rest on the paper. That creates wide swaths of smearing and obliterates your best line work. So what I do a lot of times is I use my pinky finger as kind of a tripod. That way you're up over the top of the drawing, and if there is any smearing, it's very localized. Also, you may be able to observe that having my hand up higher allows me to look underneath my hand, and if there's any smearing, you can see just a little dot on the end of my pinky. Again, I'm going to freestyle here for a little bit and show you how small and large, how staccato-like, and how broad and free some of these lines can be. Also check out the position and what my hand does during this, how it just changes depending on what kind of marks I decide to make. Here's where we all start to build muscle memory and take control of our drawing abilities and build confident drawing habits. As you can see, this is not about perfection, but is process. The ability to make the brain connect all the way from the pencil tip and repeat a mark over and over again and do it fluidly, which ultimately will allow you to draw a more dynamic form. The line ends up being pretty darn straight because I'm drawing through my shoulder and my elbow rather than my wrist. It makes for a more confident line. Okay, so here's the idea in practice that gets those controlled results. So what I imagine is a line that has a beginning and an end, a point A and point B. So of course I don't put these dots down on the paper before I start, but I do use them as illusionary little points that I can pull my line across to get to my point. You can see there's some ghost marks. I sort of practice even before I put the pencil to paper first, and then slow but methodical retrace my lines, trying to get that pattern and that repetition up to make a better line. Again, it's not perfect, but the practice is there and it's pretty close. It's the learning practice and the muscle memory that's the most important part of this exercise. Now remember, it's that muscle memory, that shoulder to arm to hand motion that you put in line. Then after you get that conquered, you do about 10 per line, and then you move to smaller strokes. And again, make sure those are parallel. Train yourself to get this exactitude. It's not perfect. You can see there's little bends and little changes, but the confidence is there. Remember, frequently you'll be building up lines and edges and shadows out of a series of lines rather than just one mark. Here's the same process used on a long arc. The line looks a little funky here and there, but in general it works pretty well. Again, moving into freestyling. Marks starting from the left going to the right, different lengths, repeating the stroke over and over again. So building the stroke up rather than just doing one and moving from right to left. Again, practicing diagonals in different directions. It's getting a little bit more confidence built in there. Here's a couple other things to practice. Number one is rotate your pencil as you draw. It will automatically sharpen the tip and not allow it to get dull. The other part is then change the angle of the hand so it goes vertical, close to horizontal, so you get thin lines and thick ones. This is definitely a skill that will allow you to be more flexible in your drawing approaches. So inside this video I included some written instructions. It allows you to go back at your leisure and read about the process rather than just listening and watching it. Then you will take these processes and be able to build them into simple forms. And from there you'll be able to take that and build it into more complex forms. And then using ellipses that we'll be showing later, you'll be able to draw really three-dimensional objects. From then you'll experiment, but with a focus, and be able to find more complex lines and forms and use different materials after that. From here, we'll start some more freestyling with these lines and building these up. You notice big wide arc, small ones, really sharp ones. Now, one of the things I'm trying to do is give the idea of a focused sharp edge and a diffuse soft edge. Now, a focused sharp edge means it's more of a sharper plane break, like an edge of a box. A diffused softer line means you have the edge of something like a balloon, where the core shadows are much more rounder. And again, you're not going to be hitting it just one line. You're going to be building it up over a series of lines. And the more, again, you can see as I kind of move through smaller movements of my hand and then come back in and then build it up with big long ones. A lot of this is about building confidence and being able to sit back and use your critical thinking skills to figure out what works and what doesn't work and how to best take these lines and build them into something else. So I included some pages about how to draw curves and how to practice your mark making abilities. To draw curves successfully, you have to really learn how to draw with fluidity and force in your marks. And by learning this skill, you'll be able to move into things like the aerodynamicness, the curves of aeroplanes and other vehicles, and then the muscle and skeleton anatomy of the human body, and be able to translate those marks in a whole different way. Okay, so now what we're doing is moving on to one of the more difficult aspects of drawing form, and that's ellipses and circles. They have to be so symmetrical and they have to work on such a fluid level. You have to really practice doing this and practice it from different directions and different shapes. As you can see when I'm doing this freestyle, I really don't have an exact idea what I'm doing, but you can see that I shift the pencils back, I'm rotating it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I speed it up, change the shape, sometimes small and build them to larger ones. All the time comparing and contrasting and correcting my mistakes as I go along. Somehow I see that you just can't stop and start drawing ellipses, so this confidence and this be able to do rotation is really important in this. So once again, I included some written material so you can reference it in the future. I find that sometimes it's good to draw pathways, that way you can plan the ellipses as you move along. So as you see, as I continue on this freestyle of drawing these different ellipses and circles, is I move around and around, change the shape of them, the depth of them, the diameter of them, give myself a pathway, and then move into more of a sort of organic quality of these. We're more like tubes and bubbles. It's all the same process. It's sort of combining the curving lines we did before with the idea of the ellipses. Now the idea of combining the last lesson we had, which was curves, along with this idea of ellipses, is really important because now we're moving more into organic soft tissue, which demands this kind of more attention, as you'll see in these upcoming drawings. Perhaps you'll see this in the combination of fluid lines and sharp lines in these lines that I drew at one of the local zoos, or in the human anatomy on this one figure in 5-minute gesture poses. Even be able to take and build form using simple organizational shapes, and then build out the line and build out the variety of lines into curves and to examine the texture of the outfit more. This is dynamic drawing, where you take the line and you bend it and change it to meet your needs and to meet your artistic expression. So at this point, we're going to take these learned skills of line and line weight, and we're going to attach them to flat shapes and show about depth and about overlapping. So you might even be able to see at this point in the drawing, I've even be able to kind of create the idea of just a very simple three-dimensional depth. The arrows I put in are where the overlaps are, and you might be able to see where the change of light quality is at that. The arrows demonstrate where those two forms come in contact. The cone is my light cone that shows the direction the light's coming in. So now I move on to another series of forms. Sketching them in, looking at the line quality, you can see where it's a little sharper. I sort of dig the line a little bit more where it overlaps. I make sure the two lines aren't the same. One's generally thicker, the other one's a little bit lighter. Again, the arrows delineate where those overlaps are. Again, I'm not finishing that. I'm sketching in a new one now. Again, I'm trying to be a little bit more complex with the shapes and the forms. Rounded with square, sharp edge with rounded edges. One of the most important parts of this exercise is to explore, see what the line will do. Build the line up. Now you can see I'm going cross contour around the form. What I'm trying to do is sculpt the form more. One thing you might notice is that the lines on the inside of the form are not as hard as the ones on the outside. One of the reasons for that is the lines on the inside aren't as sharp as the outside, because the outside lines are sort of defining where the figure and ground separation are. If I draw lines on the inside just as sharp and as heavy on the outside, what happens is the viewer frequently gets confused about what edge is what. Now a little bit more confident about the forms that I have drawn. I'm trying to decide now what I want to do with them. So what I'm doing now is I'm going again around the cross contour. Frequently in one object you see that it has a round cross contour in one area and a sharper one in the other. And you also may notice that especially when I'm drawing lines that are a little bit more rounded, I don't end them abruptly at the edge. I sweep them around the edge, hopefully creating a curving surface and the idea of a more dynamic rounded form. So at this point what I'm doing is I'm sort of exploring more of the forms on the inside where the overlaps are, using the cross contour lines vertically and horizontally, sort of gridding things out just as practice. One thing you might notice that there's a couple of lines, a few little arrows on the inside shows where the core shadow is, and that is where the form turns away from that light cone that I drew a few minutes ago. So as I work up this box, one thing you'll notice, I'll start putting arrows onto here. And that shows where the base hits the ground and where the overlapping forms are in the line quality. And as I put the A's down, the A's are the overlapping forms, right? So that is where you'll get the sharper lines in front of the more diffused lines in the background. The B is where it hits the ground, so I have a tendency to sort of anchor it down with slightly darker lines. And the C in the background is where the atmospheric perspective disappears into the background. So I included a couple pages of instructions to look at, and you can really see how this concept really starts to fold itself into overlapping organic form on the human body, demonstrating more of the sort of complexity and the simplicity of muscles and bone and overlapping structure. And this even transfers into the idea of drawing the model in motion, like these tribal belly dancers. So the last step here is to take all these techniques, build some form over the top of it, these simple sort of platonic forms, a box, tube, pyramid, an oval, a sphere. And again, I'm just sort of freestyling and seeing where the overlaps are. And just sketching out the forms. And again, as I put them together, sort of examine what successes and mistakes there are on the inside and show you how to change them and why I would change them. As I move along, I keep the drawing light, keep it loose, and see where all the forms are in relationship to one another. You might notice I thought I made the box a little bit too short, so I'm making it a little bit longer so I show that overlap with the ball a little bit more. We're crowding out the pyramid. Well, one thing I notice is that I've got a really bad tangent right where I'm drawing that little circle right there. You don't want those two objects to come together like that, so I'm going to have to erase that and move the pyramid back. You also may notice that that's the first time that I've used an eraser in this demo. I even shortened the pyramid to show that little space in between the ball and the pyramid more, so it reinforces the space there. And then I reinforce the lines. Again, so even those lines just overlapping a little bit show a depth of space. So I personally want to keep everything transparent so I can see what's going on in the relationship between all of the objects, between all the planes. I'm a little bit more confident about where stuff is. So you can see I reinforce the lines, show the overlap, and the overlapping is really important for the depth. And you also may notice that instead of just drawing one solid line, I build them up over sometimes hundreds of lines. If I'm drawing a more complicated composition, what I do is I work up the forms, work up the space, and as I'm more confident about what the results are, then I reinforce the lines in relationship to one another. But I draw all the objects together and then pick and choose what's in front of one another. So you can see now that I'm reinforcing for the first time the core shadow on the inside, where the forms break away from the light. Core shadow there. Again, you can see it's a diffuse line. I'm hitting it with a cross contour to check out and build the form. And I have that diffuse line that goes up against that straighter line of the box. So now I'm a lot more confident about where things are. You can see again, I'm drawing through the objects. So everything looks like it's almost kind of made out of glass, with the edges sort of being reinforced to show the relationship between everything. One of the rules I kind of keep in mind is the fact that the lines on the top of the forms where if the light's shining down on the form, even if you don't have a directed light source, light on the top's a little bit thinner and not as pronounced. The line on the undersides where the shadow is usually darker. Now that's just a general rule, but it's something to kind of keep in mind as you're sketching stuff up so the drawing doesn't get to be too laborious and heavy. Now, another technique to help me understand the form is that you see that my hand doesn't stop. It's constantly moving from one object to another, gridding things out, reinforcing edges, sometimes diffusing edges. I always like to get the corners of things so they project in space more, so they have more of a attitude to them. So as this simple form drawing moves to an end, you can see me reinforcing those last lines. I'm going to move the drawing down and start putting in some areas. There's a rounded corner up against another rounded corner with a sharp edge. Here's a nice negative space that I make sure that I reinforce the space there. C is where you get a rounded edge against a sharper edge of the box. D is the same thing, but it's farther back in space, so it's lighter. Here's a bunch of sharp edges together in pretty close proximity, so I make sure I reinforce them so there's no mystery in the whole process. And number one, which I kind of lost there, is a corner. Another corner, and again reinforced. Make sure that you see where those two planes separate. And even here where you get a softer edge against it, you can see the edges on the inside are softer as well. And then here's a very light corner that goes back in space. Now this is all transferable to figure drawing with its soft and hard edges and with its organicness and the ability to create structure. Vehicle design, cars with those nice curving flowing lines along with the ellipses of tires, and pulling the structure of the curving and angular lines is extremely important, as in drawing any mechanical object. But from there we move back in animals with their organic forms and textures, with a series of anatomy and muscle and straight lines and curves. Pulling that all together makes for a real successful drawing. But then we pull it back into the figure clothes and the figure nude. Learning lines and line quality is certainly important to get the character of the model and the character of the pose, along with all the other things that we've gone through in this demo. So remember, there's a part 2 to this video dealing with the human figure with line character and line quality and form. Please take a look if you get a chance. Thanks a lot. Bye.